NASCAR is all about heart-pounding moments and unpredictable finishes, but sometimes races don't live up to that hype. Whether it's a lack of drama or too much dominance from one driver, some races leave fans feeling bored. Let's take a closer look at some boring races in NASCAR history. The 2000 Dura Lube 300 at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway is often remembered as a relatively uneventful race. This race saw an introduction of a restrictor plate for a non-superspeedway track as NASCAR wanted to reduce the speed for safety concerns as there were two tragic deaths at this racetrack. Here are some of the key reasons why it was considered boring by many fans. Throughout the 300-lap race, Jeff Burton dominated, leading all 300 laps, making one of the few in NASCAR history where a driver has led every lap. While this showcased Burton's skill and his team's dominance, it made for a processional race with very little suspense at the front of the field, so a typical F1 race nowadays. Jeff Burton's complete dominance of this race, leading every lap, is rare but can be considered boring from a spectator's perspective. The lack of competitive battle for the lead made the race feel very predictable early on, as Burton's car was clearly the class of the field that day. The 2022 Blue Emu Maximum Pain Relief 400 at Martinsville is widely regarded as one of the most uneventful races of the 2022 NASCAR season. This race had a lack of cautions and on-track action, which led to many fans and analysts to describe the race as boring. And not only was it boring on TV, but in person, this race was brutal, as the temperature was extremely cold and it actually snowed pre-race before the race. William Byron led 212 of the 403 laps, which made the race feel one-dimensional. There were only 5 lead changes throughout the race, which is relatively low for a short track like Martinsville. The race featured only 4 cautions, 2 of which were for stage breaks, meaning that there were only 2 cautions for on-track incidents, which once again is rare at a short track like Martinsville. The introduction of the next-gen car was a talking point, as the new tire and car package seemed to limit usual tire wear and passing opportunities that Martinsville and other short track races are famous for. Long green flag runs made it difficult for drivers to gain positions, which made it boring. The race turned into mostly single-file racing with very few opportunities for drivers to make passes on the track. Martinsville typically allows for a lot of bumping and passing due to its short track style, but this race saw minimal action in that regard. This Martinsville race was heavily criticized for being follow the leader. With few cautions and lead changes, this left fans and even some drivers underwhelmed. The performance of the next-gen car on short tracks was a major factor in this event, and still to this day, we don't really have the amazing short track action like we used to with the old car. The 2020 Hollywood Casino 400 at Kansas was another race that divided fans in terms of excitement. While it had its important moments as part of the NASCAR playoffs, it was also seen by some as relatively uneventful for the following reasons. The race featured only 5 cautions and 2 of them were for stage breaks. This led to very long green flag runs, which reduced the opportunity for any sort of passing. Kansas Speedway can often produce multi-groove racing, but in this race, clean air was especially important. Once a driver got out front, it was difficult for others to catch and pass. Joey Logano won the race after leading the final 45 laps. He held off Kevin Harvick in these closing laps, but while the battle was somewhat tense, there was no significant challenges or lead changes during the last stretch. Logano's strong defense and Harvick's inability to pass due to the aero package led to a somewhat predictable ending once Logano took the lead. There were only 17 lead changes among 7 drivers. While this number isn't terribly low, most of the lead changes occurred during pit stop cycles or restarts rather than on-track battles. The lead changes weren't as dramatic as fans might expect in a high-stakes playoff race. As previously mentioned in the closing laps, Kevin Harvick, who had one of the more dominant cars throughout the race, couldn't pass Joey Logano because of the clean air effect. Harvick repeatedly got close to Logano, but couldn't make the move to pass him, which left some fans feeling the outcome was more about aero dependency than driver skill or strategy. This race wasn't considered a thrilling playoff race due to the lack of cautions, clean air dominance, and a limited number of lead changes. Joey Logano's win was significant as it secured his spot in the championship 4, but the race itself lacked the drama and intensity that most fans typically expect from a NASCAR playoff race. The 2000 Daytona 500 is remembered for being somewhat lackluster compared to other years. Here are some of the key reasons why this prestigious race was considered boring. There were 9 official lead changes among only 7 drivers throughout the race, which is relatively low for the Daytona 500. While superspeedway racing often sees a constant change at the front due to drafting, this race had long stretches where the leader remained unchallenged. Pole sitter Dale Jarrett led a commanding 89 laps and won the race for the 3rd time in his career. While Jarrett's victory was significant, his dominance at the front and control of the race left little room for suspense or drama. Jarrett's performance was impressive, but made the race feel less competitive. The race featured only 5 cautions for minor incidents, with none of them being big ones. This is typically associated with superspeedway racing. Without major accidents or significant restarts to bunch the field back up, the race lacked the constant excitement and unpredictability that Daytona often provides. The aerodynamic package used at the time made it difficult for drivers to pass once they got into a single file line. Much of the race was run in single file, with cars unable to create the side-by-side battles that fans typically enjoyed in restrictor plate racing. This led to long periods without much action on track. While the race did feature some action in the final laps, including a challenge from Johnny Benson, who was an underdog in this race, the outcome never seemed seriously in doubt once Dale Jarrett got back out in front. This race ended under yellow, another underwhelming factor of the race, leading some fans to be extremely disappointed with how this race, being as prestigious as it was, ended. Many competitors like Dale Earnhardt were also disappointed with how this race played out, with the aerodynamic disadvantage once cars got single file. This gave us one of Dale Earnhardt's better sound bites of his career.
That's the worst racing I've seen at Daytona in a long, long time. They took NASCAR What's Cup racing and made it some of the sorriest racing, and took the racing out of the drivers and the crew's hands. We can't adjust and can't make our cars drive like we want. They just killed the race at Daytona. That's all I got to say. Mr. Bill France Sr. probably roll over his grave if he's seen that deal.
Another prestigious event, the 2016 Coca-Cola 600, was considered boring by many fans. The race was dominated by Martin Truex Jr., who led an astonishing 392 out of the 400 laps, setting a record for the most laps led in a single NASCAR race. While this was an impressive performance, it left little room for competition or lead changes, making the race pretty predictable and uneventful. This Coca-Cola 600 had only 4 cautions throughout the race, and the Coca-Cola 600 is the longest race on the NASCAR calendar. Combined with the lack of action and lack of cautions, it made the race feel even longer to many fans, giving them viewer fatigue. As the race went on and the field got spread out, there was little wheel-to-wheel racing, with Martin Truex Jr. building his massive lead. Many other cars were lapped early, further reducing the number of competitive battles across the track. A historic and dominant night by the 78 team and Martin Truex Jr., but truthfully, this race was brutal. Not every race can be a thriller, but these races that I listed were just absolutely brutal. Let me know down in the comments what you think. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.